What if I told you that people once survived winters so brutal that 30 degrees Fahrenheit wouldn't just chill you, it could kill you? And yet they slept through the night inside what looked like nothing more than a simple skin tent. No modern heaters. No insulated sleeping bags. No electricity at all. And still, they didn't merely endure the cold. They mastered it. Tonight, we'll step into the world of the Plains tribes, families who engineered warmth out of wind, fire, buffalo hide, and pure human ingenuity. Their typus were not primitive shelters. They were living systems built through generations of observation, testing, and survival. You'll see how fire, airflow, bedding, structure, location, and daily routine all work together like gears in a machine, turning deadly cold into livable winter. By the end of this journey, you won't just understand how they stayed warm. You'll see winter and human resilience in a completely different way. Imagine standing on the open plains, where winter doesn't whisper, it roars. Blizzards roll across the horizon for miles, swallowing the land in white. Snow piles higher than a horse's back. Winds cut so deep they feel like they're stripping the warmth straight from your bones long before the sun ever rises. For the Lakota, Cheyenne, Crow, Blackfeet, Arapaho, and Kiowa, survival didn't begin with clothing, a fire, or even shelter. It began with a decision: where will we place our camp? They didn't guess. They read the land. Wind patterns were like maps. A stand of trees wasn't decoration, it was protection, capable of cutting wind speed nearly in half and raising temperatures enough to mean the difference between comfort and death. Rock outcrops offered another shield, storing heat during the short winter daylight and releasing it slowly into the night. Even a small rise in the terrain, 10, maybe 15 feet, mattered. Because cold air sinks like water into a bowl. Set your teepee in the wrong hollow, and you were sleeping inside a freezer. Water was necessary for drinking, cooking, melting snow, but camp too close, and you walked straight into frost pockets, where night air pooled and bit harder than anywhere else. Fuel had to be close. So did game trails, though predators used those same paths. Every detail was considered. Every choice was deliberate. Survival wasn't luck. It was observation sharpened into science and passed through generations that refused to forget how the winter wind works. At first glance, the teepee looks like a simple conical tent. But in truth, it was a thermodynamic marvel, a shelter that managed wind, heat, moisture, and human comfort without a single modern material. It kept families warm through winters so cold that rivers froze solid and breath turned instantly to frost. The conical shape wasn't accidental. It pushed wind upward and around the structure, reducing pressure, preventing dangerous snow buildup, and keeping the frame stable during storms. Researchers note that these designs weren't just durable, they were genuinely comfortable in sub-zero temperatures because every part of the teepee was engineered with purpose. The pole framework created a flexible skeleton that moved with the wind instead of breaking against it. Adjustable smoke flaps at the top allowed families to control airflow, letting smoke escape while keeping precious warmth inside. Even the hide placement mattered. Seams overlapped to shed rain and snow just like a perfectly tuned roof. Buffalo hides were not simply coverings. When tanned correctly, they became breathable insulation blocking icy wind while still allowing moisture to escape. This prevented condensation, the silent enemy that chills most modern tents. Inside, many typists used an inner liner of additional hides, creating a layer of trapped, dead air that worked like double-pane windows, forming a nearly invisible blanket of warmth. This wasn't primitive survival. It was environmental engineering refined across generations, built from observation, adaptation, and respect for the land. In a winter camp, fire wasn't a luxury, it was the anchor that everything else revolved around. Set carefully in a pit at the very center of the teepee, the fire warmed the air, dried clothing, heated stones for later use, and created a natural convection engine. Warm air rose upward, pulling smoke along with it, while fresh air slipped quietly in near the ground, a perfect balance of breath and heat inside a world of snow and silence. The smoke flaps at the top were not decoration. They were precision controls. adjusted with exterior poles depending on the wind. They allowed families to tune the airflow the way we adjust vents and thermostats today, clearing smoke without losing precious warmth. The result wasn't just a flame inside a shelter. It was a living ventilation system that protected the lungs while keeping the body warm enough to sleep. But fire like this didn't run on chance. It demanded constant attention. Too little care, and the coals faded into darkness. Too much fuel, and smoke, or sparks, turned the shelter dangerous. So families worked in quiet shifts, tending the flames through the night. Different fuels had different voices. Quick-burning cedar flashed bright and hot. Dense oak coals glowed long into the night. And in treeless regions, bison chips' dried dung became essential, burning clean and steady when nothing else existed. This wasn't primitive firekeeping. It was a practiced science of warmth and breath perfected through generations of long winter nights. Even with a roaring fire, the frozen ground beneath the tipi was a relentless thief of warmth. It pulled heat downward like a magnet, draining comfort from the body as the night deepened. So the tribes answered it with layered intelligence bedding systems that worked the way modern insulation does, only built entirely from the land. First came woven willow mats, laid carefully across the earth to lift sleepers just a little higher off the frozen floor. Those woven branches created thousands of tiny air pockets, and each pocket trapped heat the way a quilt does. On top of that came thick layers of dried grasses not chosen at random, but selected because they resisted moisture and held warmth through the long winter months. And finally, the last layer. Heavy buffalo robes, fur facing upward, so that body heat settled into the fibers and wrapped sleepers in a cocoon of natural insulation. Sleeping arrangements themselves were a design, not an accident. Families didn't spread out. They gathered close, forming living patterns of warmth. Adults positioned themselves to shield children and elders. Warm stones, heated by the fire earlier in the evening, were tucked near feet, backs, and sides. Shared coverings trapped pockets of air, turning each sleeping circle into a low, steady heat source. This wasn't guesswork. It was generational physics knowledge tested, refined, and trusted across lifetimes of winter nights. And because of it, people didn't just make it through the cold. They slept safely, closely, and together, while the world outside froze in silence. Contrary to modern instinct where people remove layers to avoid sweating, the Plains tribes did the opposite. In winter, they added layers. Clothing wasn't just something to wear. It was a carefully engineered insulation system that protected life in temperatures that could kill the unprepared. Closest to the skin came soft, well-worked hide. It wickeded moisture away so sweat didn't freeze against the body. Over that went thick, fur-rich layers that trapped air, turning every garment into a moving blanket of warmth. And finally, outer wraps shielded against wind, abrasion, and snow, acting like a natural shell jacket long before modern fabrics existed. Buffalo robes were the prize of winter. Taken when the fur was at its thickest, they became blankets, cloaks, and bedding that rival and in some conditions outperform modern thermal gear. Every part of the buffalo, deer, elk, wolf, or coyote contributed to this system. Nothing was wasted. Every piece had a job. And because these layers were flexible and breathable, people could work, travel, and sleep in them without trapping dangerous moisture. Even animal fat had a role. Thick buffalo or bear fat was rubbed onto exposed skin to create a windproof, waterproof barrier, a natural shield that reduced the risk of frostbite on faces, ears, and other vulnerable places where clothing couldn't fully cover. Children often received the gentler fats, while adults used heavier mixtures during the worst storms. None of this was accidental. It was the science of survival precision layering refined over generations, shaped by experience, observation, and respect for the land. Winter survival wasn't a collection of random tricks. It was a living system, a rhythm carried out day after day, where every habit protected life. Morning didn't begin with comfort. It began with duty. The fire was checked, coals stirred back to life, stones reheated, bedding fluffed and redistributed so trapped air stayed warm and dry. Clothing layers were inspected and repaired. Food wasn't a luxury either. Pemmican, that powerful blend of dried meat and fat, was prepared and rationed so energy stayed steady even when hunting was impossible. These weren't chores. They were survival procedures, passed down through memory and repetition until they became instinct. Camp defense was part of that rhythm too. Winter drove predators closer: wolves, mountain lions, and bears searching for anything that moved. Dogs were not just companions. They were trained guardians, raised from puppies to recognize scents, sounds, and movement. Their barks carried meaning: one sound for wolves, another for cats, another for strangers. Weapons were placed with intention so they could be reached in darkness. Everyone knew what to do. Drills weren't called drills. They were simply life. And that's the true genius of this world. Location, shelter, fire, clothing, food storage, dogs, weapons, and daily routine, each part supported the others. If one piece failed, the rest strained under the weight. But when they worked together, families didn't just endure winter. They thrived inside it, protected by systems built from knowledge, discipline, and generations of experience written into daily life. What kept the Plains tribes alive through winters that would freeze modern cities? It was never just one trick, not one fire, not one buffalo hide. Survival came from the integration of everything: reading the environment, engineering brilliant shelters, maintaining disciplined routines, and passing collective knowledge through generations. Their winter systems were not primitive. They were holistic thermodynamics in motion, behavioral science, ecological awareness, and community structure working together. Perfected not in textbooks but in real life. And here's the real reflection for us today. Technology makes survival easier, but it also distances us from understanding how systems support one another. When we face modern challenges, environmental, social, or technological, what systems thinking have we forgotten that these ancestral experts once understood instinctively? Thanks for exploring ancient ingenuity with native legends uncovered. Stay curious, there are more forgotten survival systems waiting to be rediscovered. Hit subscribe and join us as we uncover the wisdom that modern life forgot.